So that was the first on the Edlow podcast ever. My laptop randomly died for no reason, so I'm not sure what happened there. But here we are. So you were saying about there's like different kink communities.
Odds died.
What's that?
Okay. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
That's okay. So you were saying that you had different kink communities.
Right. So different levels of kink within the community. So depending on what kind of kinky play you like, kind of depends on who you hang out with.
Interesting. Wow. So okay. So within your group, you mentioned, I think, a little bit earlier that you started out with just kind of swinging, and I guess that was part of what I wanted to ask you. I got to imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I got to imagine you don't go from one day just being like we're monogamous to just being like we're polyamorous, right? Was there kind of a progression here where you dab, like it sounded like, after reading the book, sex life got a little bit more adventurous. Is that right? And then kind of graduated to swinging.
Yeah. So we would meet people. It was like, I don't know if you've ever used a dating app, but you meet people, connect with people on a dating app, you talk for a little bit, decide that you want to meet in person. We would meet. We had rules that because we wanted to make sure that we were thinking clearly and making good decisions when it comes to this. We had a no sex on the first date rules. It was for the purpose of making sure that they were good, that they were that we wouldn't have been taken advantage of because we were new at this, or I don't know. We wanted to make sure that we were in a safe place before being so vulnerable. So that's kind of how it started, is that, we would go on dates, we would talk to people like texting. And then, after like a date, sometimes two, it was like, okay, we're ready. And it was usually that we would meet other couples, or a single female. So that was kind of the demographic, I guess, that we were looking for originally.
One of the questions that came through, and I think it's an interesting one, because we've kind of talked about this shame culture that you're in, was when you first did you have any feelings of shame the first time you tried, I guess, swinging?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what that looked like. It was more like, am I making the right decision here? Like, how is this going to affect our marriage long term? I mean, these are things that we thought about and talked about before we did anything. There were boundaries that we set. I kind of relate it to a birth plan. Like, you go into, you're going into the hospital, you have your birth plan of how you want the delivery of birth of your child to go. And sometimes the birth plan works, and sometimes you have to just throw it out the window. So we went in with an idea of, this is what we want it to look like. But once you get into the situation, you're like, okay, well, that's going to have to change, or that'll be modified, or I thought I would be okay with that, but actually I'm not. So maybe if we did this instead. So that first, few months, there was a lot of growing pains, as far as like, you're going from an upbringing, a society, and a religion that's very monogamous. And you're like, and you're not at this point. And so to be in that situation of, am I actually doing the right thing here? Like, maybe I'm second guessing myself. And so there was a moment where, we decided, we're like, okay, you know what, we gave this a shot. I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. I need to take a step back. Maybe this isn't something that I want to do. And then we talked about it again, reevaluated and moved some boundaries. And we're like, okay, I feel comfortable with this. And then we got back into it. And after that, having like a better idea of what to expect and how we figured out how to better navigate this world.
Were there things that when you got into this lifestyle, were there things that you weren't expecting to happen that happened? And I'm not talking about specifically sexually. I mean, just like feelings that were shared, things that bothered you, things that didn't bother you, anything of that nature.
So I would say, focusing on the things that bothered me, you get into me specifically, because I can only share my story. But one of the things was, you get into a 15 plus year marriage, and you're like, you get into that monotony, the rut of every day. And things that you did while you were dating or newly married, you kind of don't do anymore. Like the special texting, or I don't know, sending pictures, or planning like a cute date activity versus just going to Target or the grocery store. And so it was those things. Like, if I could spend the time texting a guy or girl, or plan a cute date with this person who's not my husband, I could do that for my husband, and he could do that for me. And so I wasn't, we had come into this thinking that we were stronger than ever, and we really noticed where we could improve, where our communication could improve, where our like the time and attention and intention of our actions towards each other could improve. But there were also things that I got from this, or have gotten from this, that I was not expecting. And that is like deep friendships. Like, you're sharing yourself with somebody. You build those relationships really quickly. You're vulnerable and you're open really fast. Like, things that could take a normal friendship years to reveal about yourself, you're revealing in a text message to someone you might not have even met in person yet.
What do you think it is about the lifestyle the polyamorous lifestyle, that contributes to that?
I think part of it is that there is no room to hide. You can't hide. You can't. You have to be upfront. You have to say, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I want.
Do you feel like, since being in the polyamorous lifestyle, that those traits are carrying over to other parts of your body, or I mean, other parts of your life?
Yes. I think at least in my experience, I'm able to communicate better. I think I've learned a lot about communication that I can attribute to my boyfriend. It's so weird to call him that, but I have learned a lot about communication from him, and how to be direct but not be a jerk about it. 'Cause that was my problem, is that I was like, no, this is it. It's black and white. This is the issue. Like, come on. And he's like, you could be direct, but you don't have to be a jerk.
Right.
He didn't
So
use those words. He didn't use those words.
right, because he wasn't being a jerk. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So what okay, so I gotta ask, you got a boyfriend?
Yeah, so that was also something that I wasn't expecting.
Mhm.
So like I said, when we first opened up our marriage, we were looking for something, I would say, like more like friends with benefits. Like we
Mhm.
weren't looking for we were looking for a friendship connection, and we could have some fun every once in a while.
And when you say we, you mean like you and your husband would like have a couple, like a friend couple that would come over, you'd have a game night and then fool around.
Right.
Okay. Okay. And then, but the boyfriend that you have not really connected to your husband, or is it?
So we met this couple um who are some of the best people I've ever met. They are fabulous. They're kind, they're compassionate, and they're just lovely humans. And we weren't expecting to fall head over heels in love with each other. And so we have, my husband is dating the wife, and I'm dating the husband. And there's also room for us as females to explore our sexuality together.
Hmm. Okay. Interesting. So, uh, is this so you mentioned earlier that you and your husband were exploring together, not necessarily apart,
Hmm.
but now there is occasion then, I'm assuming if you are dating your boyfriend and he's dating his girlfriend, that those are apart, right? Or they're all together.
A little bit of both. It really started at first like, this is all of us together. We would go on group dates all together. But then it just naturally evolved into like, I really love this person and I want to get to know them better, more intimately. And to do that, this is what I want it to look like. So we would have, and it wasn't just me forcing that or pushing it. It was a group consensus of this is what we wanted. And
Mhm.
so we would start going on individual dates with each other. So like I would go every Wednesday on a date with my boyfriend, and my husband would go on a date every Thursday with his girlfriend.
Hmm.
But we still do like, while we do have individual experiences, we still have group experiences as well.
So, I mean, is there ever any jealousy? Like, what if your husband likes his girlfriend more than you?
You really have to, yeah, to answer your question, yes, there have been moments of jealousy, especially coming from a monogamous relationship where you're like, where all you had was each other. And then now all of a sudden there's more people involved, and you're like, wait, but like, we're still good, right? Like, I'm still your favorite. I'm
Hmm.
still. And so, yes, there are or have been moments of jealousy.
Hmm.
I think as you have more experiences and there's more security in your relationship with your spouse, then those jealousies become less and less. Like, I know that at the end of the day, when my husband comes home from his date on Thursday or Tuesday or whatever day, that he's still coming home and we're sleeping in the same bed together. We have a life together. We have a love for each other. We're not just roommates. We are committed to each other. We love each other. We have kids together. We have history together. And that's not something that will change.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess it just, I mean, again, this is not something that I've necessarily engaged in, but I gotta think, I mean, like, are you worried, I guess, that there's a danger? that you may develop stronger feelings for a boyfriend than you would your husband, and vice versa?
I mean, the risk is always there. I
Mm-hmm.
actually was talking to a friend of mine who's also in the polyamorous lifestyle. And he said he's married. And he said, you know, if my wife came up to me and said, I have fallen for this other guy and I don't want to be married to you anymore. And their kind of rule is that for 6 months, they shut it down, only focus on each other, and be in a monogamous relationship for 6 months. And at the end of the 6 months, if she still has that feeling of, I don't love you anymore, I'd rather be with this person, or I love you, but I don't love you as much as this person, and I want to be married to this person instead, then his thing is, okay, we tried. I appreciate you and the relationship and what we had in our life together, and go have that happiness because I love you. Go have that happiness with the next person.
You think though that you would be good with that?
So there's this term called compersion. And what it is you have a relationship with someone. So my husband and I are in a relationship, and he has experiences, and I'm happy because he's happy. I'm
Mhm.
happy that he's having these experiences. And so that's kind of how, I mean, I'm not going to lie and say that it'll be easy and yeah, go ahead and go and do that. That's not what I'm saying. I imagine it would be really sad. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I love my husband and I want him to be happy. And if that's not with me, then I'm I'm going to have to be okay with that.
Yeah, I guess that's the I guess for me, and I've known you're not the first person I've talked to who's engaged in this. I've had, I think I told you, I got right before we came on the air. I was getting text messages from a good friend of mine who experimented a little while and ended up getting divorced as a result. And Now I think that they were in a different spot than you, in that they were exploring that to kind of resolve problems, which surprise, surprise, it didn't resolve anything, right? But it's I gotta think, like, you know, don't you worry about that risk being there? I mean, maybe this is just me and my insecure self, and maybe some of the trauma I've experienced in situations in the past, but like that, I just got to think like that would be hard. I mean, is that hard? That part of it?
So my question for you is, you have a medical situation, you have to go in and have surgery. The risk with surgery is always death.
Sure.
Does that stop you from having the procedure?
Well, it depends on how much I need the surgery. Uh, I always tell, like, I'm an injury attorney, right? And I always tell my clients, if you can avoid surgery, you should. It's the last option. So yeah, I would certainly weigh in the need for the surgery uh, to determine whether I was willing to take that risk. And
So
so,
in my experience, I have had to have a medical procedure in which it wasn't a life or death situation, but it was necessary.
okay.
And I tried to put it off for a really long time.
Hmm.
And I did for about 2 years.
Hmm.
And then I finally had to have it, and I was like, why didn't I do this sooner? Has improved my quality of life immensely.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
risk is death. The risk could have been blindness. There were so many
Sure.
risks associated.
Sure. Yeah,
And so that,
I guess I understand where you're coming from, and it sounds like, at least from what you're telling me, it sounds like it's definitely working for you and creating a more fulfilling, a fulfilling experience with your spouse. Which more power to you. But I guess for me, like hearing it from with my experience in relationships and my, I guess for lack of a better term, trauma from things that have gone on in my life, that would be something that I would be extremely concerned about. Is that because look, here's the thing, right? Like this is a new relationship is always more exciting than an old one.
mhm,
Especially when you've been married, for a number of years. Like uh, the excitement of meeting somebody new and getting to know them and learning their interests, and they're excited to see you and you're excited to see them. That takes up a lot of attention, I gotta imagine, right? And so uh and if you get somebody who really, because every marriage, and this is something that's interesting, is that every marriage you have, like, there's going to be things, nobody's perfect. So I'm sure your husband's got some quirks that were probably cute when you were dating and they're no longer
mhm,
cute, right? And
mhm.
vice versa. Uh, so does the communication with your husband help with that? Because does he ever get jealous? Does he ever see you texting with somebody else or being really excited to go on a date with your boyfriend or whatever and go, hey, what about me? Does that happen?
Uh, yeah, I would say it did at first, and there has been times where it's come up, and I think I mentioned it or touched on it a little bit earlier, where it was like, if I'm taking the time to text my boyfriend, I should also remember to take the time to text my husband as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And so that's something that, every relationship is different, but we have rules and boundaries as far as, um, I mean, texting, for example. When we're first entering into a relationship, we have a group text thread, and we don't do individual texting
mm-hmm.
until we're in a place where we feel comfortable with that.
Okay. Okay.
So that also eliminates, like, oh, you're texting her and not me. Well, no, I'm texting both of you because this is a
Mm,
group conversation.
interesting. So, um, one of the questions that came through that's kind of along the same lines is, why not just experience these different experiences that you wanted to experience with your spouse?
Because I can't have sex with a girl if my spouse is a boy.
Right. That's one. So that's one. That's one that makes a lot of sense. you
Well,
know,
there's,
but
I mean, there's also there's different things um, like, for example, sexually, there's things that my husband wants to do, and there's things that he doesn't necessarily feel comfortable or want to do. And so it's kind of nice that if I want something a certain way and he doesn't want to do that, or
Mhm.
it makes him feel uncomfortable, then I am able to explore that with someone else.
Hmm.
And you can't, like, it's not it's not the most fulfilling thing. Okay, so example, if I'm like, I want you to do this, and he's like, well, I don't really want to do that, but I'll do it because I love you. It's not as enjoyable as if you both people who were participating enjoyed it. Does
Was
that make
into it.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're, yeah. Well, okay. Just from a practical standpoint, someone who's really into something is going to have a different level of enthusiasm than someone that's not. Right.
Right.
So there's that. And also, probably in the back of your mind, you're thinking to yourself, man, you know, he's not really into this. I know he's putting in an effort, but in the back of your mind, you're like, I kind of force him to doing something he doesn't want to
Right.
do. Yeah, that makes sense, I guess.
And
Yeah.
there are things that I learned since opening up that I didn't even know existed or was a thing
Mhm.
until we met other people who were a part of that community.
Mhm. Mhm. That's interesting. Things you're like, oh, I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah, I mean, would you like me to give you an example?
You can give me an example, sure. Let's hear it.
Okay. Okay, so there's like in the BDSM and kink community, there's like a lot of sensory stimulation and play. And one of these things is called a vac bed, and you get into this like material and then they suck all of the air out. So it's like, so how explain this?
The area of the bed, you mean?
A vac bed, like a vacuum bed. So it sucks all of the air out. And so you're kind of like, so every point of your body is being
Like sucked on by a vacuum?
not, that's going to sound so weird.
I
It's
got not
almost
gonna
like,
lie.
you know, those storage
It
bags?
sounds it sounds suspect.
You know, those storage bags, like where you suck the air out of it to make it smaller, like to store blankets or whatever?
Oh yeah. Okay.
It's like that, but for humans. But
Uh,
it doesn't like shrink you down to size. It doesn't
well,
like,
now that you've explained it that way, it's just, no, it just okay. So this is a thing.
yes. So like you could breathe. There's a place where
Okay.
you can breathe. But
Oh, good.
but anyway, this is something that I didn't even know existed until
I gotta tell you, I was today years old when I heard it existed too. So you're in a vacuum bed,
yeah.
getting sucked into like a pillow, like a blanket in one of those Ziploc things, and that's exciting. Okay, okay.
I
No, I
have
mean,
never done it. I have never
okay,
done it.
no, okay, no. I
I'm
it
not
just
gonna yuck someone's yum. It sounds interesting to me. However,
yeah,
um,
it's just so well, it's interesting because okay, for me, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, who thought that was a good idea? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, clearly it is. Somebody likes it, right? But I'm like, I've never looked at like a blanket being sucked into one of those things and been like, I wish my body was doing that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm curious where that came from.
I
You know?
don't know. Have no idea.
Okay. So I feel like I could have a lot of fun with this, but I gotta tell you, I wanna ask you a couple more questions that were asked. Well, first, let me ask this question. So you've mentioned to me in the past, and you kind of suggested this earlier. You do believe. Well, let me ask it this way. I've asked you in the past if there are other former or less active members of the LDS Church within your community, and you seem to suggest that there were quite a large number of them, and that there's also other high demand religious people coming from high demand religions involved. Is that accurate?
Yes. So
Yeah.
we have come across a lot of um, previously Mormon couples that left in various stages. The couple that we're dating, they were older like us, so post mission, post temple marriage, left the church, about 5, 6 years ago. We have another friend who left the church in his 20s in college. Another friend left in when he was 12. So there's varying degrees of Mormonism or previous members, but yes, we have come across a lot. And
So
in
what do
our
you go ahead.
in our friend group that we've created, at least one of the couples or one of the individuals in a couple have come from very orthodox religions. So whether it's Christianity, Catholicism, Christian Scientists, there's someone who has had a very restrictive upbringing.
Interesting. So, what is it about your experience within the church that you feel contributed to your desire to engage in a polyamorous relationship?
So I've thought about, I remember learning about polygamy, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, as a Mormon, as the early history of the church. And I was like, but it kind of sucks that it's just like the guy that gets all these girls. So
When did you think that's so? I gotta say, sorry to interrupt you, but I gotta say, that is so different than most of the women I know who have thought about polygamy. So you're saying like the whole time you heard about polygamy, you're like, that's cool?
Yeah, but I was always upset that like the girls couldn't have more than one husband. It was always the guys had more than one wife, but it wasn't
Okay,
reciprocated.
that's so interesting.
And I remember thinking, like, do you think they all have sex together? Like, no.
Yeah,
They do.
it's so that's interesting. Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that because I actually think that there's a lot of people I know who they struggle with that doctrine, the polygamy doctrine. They struggle with that in early church history. But you were all for it. That's really
Well,
interesting.
I wouldn't say I was all for it.
Okay.
Because there were aspects of polygamy, like marrying underage women or
Right.
sending men off to missions and then marrying their wives. There were things that were seriously wrong with that.
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
but the idea of having kind of that commune, that community of people to help raise kids or to help household, like with the household or relationships, like, yeah, I would say that kind of appealed to me. But
Mm.
also the idea of like wanting to have these experiences, explore my sexuality with women, that was something that I wanted to do. But I love my husband. I don't want to leave him so that I could go and sow my wild oats.
Mm.
And I why can't I do it with him?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think what's interesting to me, and this is just an observer, right? Like, and this is an observer of somebody who's seen a few couples go down this road, but albeit most of them are not in the situation that you're in, right? Like you've made it clear, and I believe you that um, you and your husband were in a good spot when you made this decision. I think that very much probably contributes to the success that you've had in this, which it sounds like you would view this. Would you agree that you would view this as a successful polyamorous relationship so far?
So far, yes. I don't want to tote this or help people to perceive that this is like a cakewalk. It hasn't always been easy. The journey since opening up hasn't been easy,
Hmm.
but there has been significant growth both for us as a couple and us as individuals. And I, things have been a little rocky, so at some points more than others. But
Huh.
as of right now, as of today, we are in a very fulfilling, strong marriage, and it's getting stronger.
So the rocky parts, or do you feel comfortable explaining what made it rocky?
Um, a lot of it, is the feelings of jealousy of, you know, I've been
Hmm.
asking you to do this for 15 years and you've yet to do it, but someone asks you to do it and you jump at the chance to help them or to do that for them, provide that for them.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of, it's really hard sometimes not to compare.
Yeah.
And but comparison is the thief of joy, and you're only hurting yourself comparing relationships. And we're in different places. Like, we were in our early 20s when we got married. There's been a lot of growth. There's been a lot of understanding and learning. And so the people that we're engaging in relationships with, they're not meeting us as 20-year-olds that are naive and don't know much or have life experience. They're meeting us in our mid to late 30s, where we have a better understanding of relationships and what they need and how to foster them and how to listen and communicate. And so those things that you've been asking for 10 or 15 years, they're easier to do with someone else that's new and is asking for it. But it's also important to do those things for your spouse as well.
No, that makes sense. What you're saying there, but I think, I bet, like, for example, my friend who, I mean, and I'm telling you, she sent me a ton of messages about this, but again, her experience was way different than yours. And what I think is interesting here is the the progression, right? Like, you read a book, it makes your sex life a lot hotter. You have some exploration you want to do with, girls. So then there's threesomes. Then you're like, let's add couples. Now you've got a boyfriend. He's got a girlfriend. Are you concerned that if this continues to go down the road, that you're going to go kind of grow apart in a way? Is that a concern?
It's something that I've thought about.
Mm-hmm.
I think that my husband and I, we met at such a young age. We're almost like trauma bonded, not, just from our life and history and experiences together.
I know a lot about that. Yeah.
That there's a little bit of codependency there. Like, I can't do this without you.
Right.
And while there's some unhealthiness to that, and I think that after opening up, we have become more autonomous, and we have become, like, yes, we have grown together as a couple, but we've grown as individuals too, and we've kind of like discovered ourselves and who we are. And for some people, for some couples, that can result in them growing apart. But if you truly love each other and you are committed to each other and you want to stay together, then you're growing as individuals, but together.
Okay. Oh, on that, with the communication, I wanted to ask, has there been any sort of like couples therapy that you guys did either before or after engaging this?
No, not couples therapy. It is something that we have explored. We haven't done it yet, but there was the moments where it was particularly rocky, growth spurt, growing pains, that we decided, we're like, maybe we should go to couples therapy. We weren't communicating well. I didn't feel like I was being heard. My husband didn't feel like he was being heard. And so it felt like we were hitting a wall, and we're like, we need someone to help us, like, mediate and interpret and help each other understand what we're trying to say.
Yeah.
What's the root of the issue? And so that is something that we thought about. But we actually, and I don't know if this was a smart thing to do, but I hate I hate the term boyfriend because it sounds so juvenile. But my boyfriend or partner that's not my husband, he's really really good at communication. I've said I've learned a lot from him, and he has had to sometimes mediate conversations for us, and he's very good at separating, like, you know, even though I love you, I'm still gonna be fair to your husband. And anyway, so he's been really good and helpful, both him and his wife, helping us kind of navigate some of those conversations and how we can truly hear each other, how we can reframe things so that they're not angry or attacking, or I don't know.
That's really, I gotta tell you, like, I could not imagine, like, that seems like such an explosive situation. Your boyfriend is mediating a conversation between you and your husband. I guess it's different because you guys are all, you're all kind of involved in it, right? I mean, he's dating the wife, so I mean, you're all involved in it together. But boy, like if I were in a situation where I was jealous and then my significant other's boyfriend was trying, I don't know if I would be super receptive to that to that assistance.
Right. Right. And it was actually something I was really hesitant to do and reluctant. And
Right.
I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to. It wasn't necessarily like the issue was a feeling of jealousy. That wasn't always the case. But it was like, we were like, we're having this problem and we can't get through it. And it becomes, instead of like fighting over what the actual issue is, you're fighting over how you're talking to each other. I don't know if you've had that experience. Like,
Mm,
well, you said this and it made me feel like this. And if you hadn't done this, then I wouldn't do this. And so it's that, like, you're fighting about fighting.
yeah.
And so it had gotten to a point where where we weren't even like fighting about anything other than fighting. I don't, it just was so stupid.
No.
And so it wasn't like necessarily personal like that, like
Mm,
feelings of jealousy or whatever, but it was a problem that we couldn't get past, and he offered it to us and we said no thank you, like we don't want you to get in the middle of our stuff. And and finally, like, after, because it was like a good week of fighting, that was the longest, most fighting that my husband and I had ever done.
mm,
um that we were finally like, this isn't working, let's just try it. And there's a sense of, when there's other people involved, there's accountability there.
yeah.
So like, um I see that you're rolling your eyes
No, I'm
a
not rolling.
lot.
I'm not rolling my eyes at all.
Oh, no, no, I'm not talking about you. Like,
Oh,
this is
okay.
like we're in an argument and they're like, why are you making that face? Or this face makes me think that, or when you say this, this is how it I perceive it. Is that what you meant to say? No. Okay. Can you reframe it, or can you say it differently so that it, or what did you mean to say? I meant to say this. Okay, well maybe this is how you could say it, or this is how you could reframe it. Or, you're asking for, um so my husband would be asking me, like, you need to be less reactive, like you go from 0 to 60
Mm,
and you don't need to. Okay, so how can you work this situation so that it's conducive for growth, it's conducive for communication and understanding? Because if you're huffing and walking away, like, that's not, you can't communicate.
mm.
I don't know, does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I got to tell you, that's probably a conversation that every married couple has ever had whether they're polyamorous or not. Those are communication is such a difficult thing, especially when you're just talking past each other. And
Right.
unfortunately, it sounds like you were both emotionally mature enough to be able to recognize your part and change the way that you're doing it. Because I can tell you, when you're dealing with it, and a party can't change it, it makes it really difficult. But do you ever worry that the nature of your polyamorous relationship is eventually going to create major problems with your marriage?
I don't know.
Hmm.
I would like to think that it doesn't, but there's risk associated with everything, with every
Sure.
decision.
Sure. I guess what I mean is, like, not that do you think it's having an effect right now? And that's a question we could ask. But I mean, do you ever worry, oh man, like if we continue down this road, this could potentially be a major problem for our marriage?
I do not foresee that. I have not experienced that yet.
Okay. So that's a next question I wanted to ask is okay, so you mentioned that, like, there's a lot of things that you've experienced, right? There's a lot of things or there's things that you've wanted to experience, and that's kind of why you opened it up, so you could experience these things. Do you foresee a time where you've experienced it all and you go back to monogamy?
This is actually a conversation that we have had,
Hmm.
um, specifically with the couple that we're dating.
Hmm.
Um, so there was talk or discussion of exclusivity, so that
Hmm.
we were the only couple they were dating, and they were the only couple we were dating. And we were like, we just opened up. That's something that there's experiences that I want to have, or that we want to have, that we have not been able to do yet. And so as of right now, no, I don't want to. I want more experiences before I become exclusive. Does that mean we'll never be exclusive? No.
Hmm.
It means there's potential there, just not right now.
So
And so that's the same for my husband and I. Is there's there's always room for monogamy. There's always room. We're kind of like, if our relationship were to get so bad, like, or not even bad, but like if we're noticing a trend of, like, we feel maybe disconnected, or we feel like maybe we're not as focused on each other as we should be, you know what? Let's take a break for a little bit. Let's
hmm,
take a break from polyamory and just focus on each other, and make sure
yeah,
that we're in a good place before we continue on. Maybe
but
when we're old and we don't have the patience to be in polyamorous relationships, maybe we'll be like, okay, you know what, we're done. We had our fun, or we had created these memories and relationships, and it was great, but we're fulfilled, and now we want to go back to monogamy. There is room for that, yes.
hmm. So uh how do you get it seems like that would be really hard to put back in the box, like you've had all
Yeah.
these experiences, and you've had all these different relationships, and you've been able to feel that excitement of a new relationship again, and the things that you do when you're dating that you don't necessarily do after however long you've been married and you got kids and all those things, right? Uh how do you go back to that? That'd be really tough, I would think.
So my question for you is,
Mm-hmm.
There are, I don't know your life experience, but people who date
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of different people before, sometimes at the same time, and then they meet that person and they're like, this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah,
They enter into a monogamous relationship.
sure.
We did that just backwards.
Right, right. So I guess, yeah, I think it would be that. That's a good point. It would be, but man, yeah, that would. I just wonder, like, would you feel as though you're missing out on something? But I don't know. That's interesting. Now, same question. Do you ever foresee there being a place in your life to re-engage with the church?
You know, when I first left, there was a lot of like, am I doing the right thing? Maybe I should go back. Maybe I should give it another shot. But now, no.
Hmm. You know, those things, those spiritual experiences that you've had over your life. Um, do you feel like you still have them?
Spiritual experiences?
Yeah, like because we talked about like you've had a few experiences when you were, like you were in the temple reading the scriptures and you felt a spiritual experience. But you also mentioned that you also tend to get some spirituality out of nature and things of those things. So I'm just curious, you've had a bunch of spiritual experiences in connection with your church membership, sort of, it sounds like. So what about now? Like you haven't been going to church for a while. Do you still have occasion where you have spiritual experiences?
Um, yes, they look different, and I don't attribute them to the spirit.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that might have been part of my confusion or part of my misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So the power of water and crashing waves is something that is so therapeutic and grounding for me.
Hmm.
So what you may call like a spiritual experience for me is more like a therapeutic, grounding, connected thing. I don't
No,
even know
that
what to call
no,
it.
I understand what you're saying. I understand. I know a lot of people who, especially around the ocean, they feel that like some people just going to the ocean is just like so therapeutic for them. But I think let me put it this way. I'm going to kind of put on my attorney hat a little bit. So when you were going to church, you had those experiences when you were going to um, like while you're going to church, you had those experiences when you went to the ocean, right? And then
Mhm.
you also had some experiences that were in connection with your church attendance and work, right? Spiritual experiences. Back then, did they feel the same, or did you still see a difference between those two things?
That's a great question. Um, I guess there would be a difference because if you're reading the scriptures or you're saying your prayers, seeking personal revelation, you attribute those things to the spirit, to divinity.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But if you're like, there were moments where, like I said, I went through some medical stuff and
Yeah,
I was like, I just need to go to the ocean because I need to be grounded. I need to feel that. And so I had that sense of like, everything will be okay.
sure.
But I wouldn't say I attributed that to the spirit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I guess that's my question is that those spiritual experiences that you had in connection with the church membership, which I can tell you, just this is just my experience, is that some of those spiritual experiences um, have been so powerful. They're probably what keeps me going to church sometimes is some very serious experiences. Um, I can remember one. I'll just share this experience I had recently where I was there with my kids and we were alone, really struggling, everybody. And I was having one of those moments that I think we all have where, you're like, why is this happening to me type of thing, and I was kind of in that spot. I was like, this isn't fair. This isn't cool. I don't know. And kids were running around like they do, just being crazy. And I'm trying to make dinner and I'm sitting there and I'm doing everything I can to just keep it together because it was such a struggle. And I remember kind of saying a prayer to myself, just kind of saying something like, you know, okay, you know, you, you're going to have to show me something here to let me know that I'm on the right track, that this is right. And, because I'm really struggling and I'm really having a hard time right now. Now so I sit down to dinner and my kids are there and we used to do this thing where we would go around the room and we would each say one nice thing about each other. And my youngest, he's like, why don't we do that? And I go, yeah, that's fine. And as my kids went around, they said some things that, usually it's like, oh, Piper, you're really good at soccer, something very superficial. But that night, it was different. And my oldest son, looked at me and he's like, I'm really grateful that you stayed in the church. And he's like, because if you hadn't done that, I don't think I would. And I remember thinking that and going, like, that had to come from somewhere. And if it doesn't come from God, where does it come from? In the exact right moment. What do I attribute that to if it's not God? What do you think?
I can't answer that. Coincidence?
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Is that you can say that, right? Like, is that coincidence? Possibly, right? It's not 100%, right? It couldn't have been, but I've had enough experiences like that. And I haven't ever been able to replicate that anywhere else than church. Now I've gone to other churches. So
Mm-hmm.
it very well could be not for a long periods of time, but I've gone to other churches and I have felt the Spirit in other churches.
Uh-huh.
So this is not exclusive to the Mormon church, but it is church where I feel it, and I don't feel that anywhere else. I've felt, like I've been at a place, like I remember going with my kids to a Cubs game and just sitting there in the moment and being like, this is a moment I'll remember forever. Like sitting at Wrigley Field with my two boys, behind home plate. I'm like, these are the moments why I work so hard. That is a different feeling than the feeling I got in that moment there. And I've had many like that. So like, do you ever, and I got to imagine you've had those, do you ever, and I'm not trying to do this to make you feel bad. I hope you understand that. I'm curious, or anything like that. I'm not doing that, but I'm curious, do you feel that anywhere else?
I haven't looked anywhere else.
Yeah. If you ever do, I want you to tell me about it.
Okay.
Because I like I said, I'd be curious if that could be replicated anywhere else. Because like I said, it's one of the things that keeps me going. Is that in the very moments that I need those things, it seems to come. And whether that is a placebo effect or not, it's certainly helpful for me. Now, one other question I want to ask you, kind of associated with that. So you're still on a ministering list. You're not, you're still a member, right? You didn't get your name removed, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So you're still on a list in your ward as somebody who doesn't come, maybe they haven't come, but they're supposed to. So if a minister were to knock on your door, I mean, you've been gone from the church, what, 5 years now, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. If a minister knocked on your door, how would you want them to approach you? And would you be receptive if someone came by?
Um, I wouldn't be mean because I understand the culture of the church. I understand that they're just doing what has been asked for them, and I can't be mad.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I don't like is the intention behind it.
What do you mean
Am
by that?
so like, am I just a number?
Mm-hmm.
Am I just like, oh, this person's on my list, I have to reach out to them? Or
Mm-hmm.
is it because you genuinely, truly care about me and love me as a person?
Yeah.
And I can answer that question
Mm-hmm.
more often than not. I am a number,
No,
a name on
you're,
a roll that
I
someone
would,
needs to reach out.
I got to tell you, I, I wish I could tell you that that wasn't true. You know what I mean? More often than not, like, I've experienced that myself as an elders quorum president. Back when it was not ministering, it was home teaching, and you had to you had to see everybody every month.
Uh-huh.
You should have seen me running from door to door on the last day of the month, trying to hit everybody's home teaching numbers. Because like, when as the elders quorum president, there was like, there were people who wouldn't do it, right? So I would go and do it for them.
Yeah.
And I was just knocking on the door just to say they were visited. You know what I mean? Like, I got to admit, as much as I hate to admit it, it's happened to me numerous times. But what do you? But I can tell you personally from ministering myself that there have been people who've just been a name on the list who turned into really good friends. So I guess you would be nice, but would you be receptive if somebody came by a few times and all of that? And I guess the more important question I think would be like, as somebody who's not a member, or not an active member rather, how would you want to be approached?
I've been approached by I'm kind of in a little unique situation here. And I
Hmm.
can't say too much because it'll reveal things about me that I don't want revealed.
Sure,
But,
sure.
um, I have contact with someone who is a member of my ward
Hmm.
outside of the church. And I don't know, but this is an assumption that this person counts those interactions as contact.
I see. So you don't know if you're quote unquote on their ministering list or not,
Correct.
or is it a situation where you've asked this person you have contact with outside of the church, hey, I don't want someone coming by my house. Can we just count this?
No, that is not a conversation that I've had with this person. But I also don't know if they're like, I don't know if I'm on their list. I don't know if they're like, oh yeah, I'm in contact with her, that she's doing fine, still not interested.
Hmm.
But
Interesting.
I do know when I've been talked about in a meeting because I get the primary contacting my kids. I get Relief Society contacting me. I don't think Elders Quorum ever contacts my husband. We'll
Well,
get missionaries by our house, come by our house. And it's all like within weeks of each other. And I'm like, oh yeah, I must have been talked about in a meeting.
yeah.
And
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, we got to be better at that. We got to be better at that. And I got to tell you, is the human aspect of it, as someone who's been in a bishopric and who's been, in those places. It's hard. It's hard when you've got, you know, um, 150 people, on the list that you're trying to visit. Sometimes it can get that way, and it's not fair. It's not right. It's not a good excuse, but it happens. And especially when you get somebody, this is just me venting now as someone who's been in leadership. Nothing is more frustrating when you're really trying to do all these things and visit all these people, and then you got somebody who just refuses to do it. I swear, I've never wanted to choke somebody more. Then a guy who like came up to me and I said, hey, I was trying to schedule him to do like because his ministering is way different than home teaching used to be. Like it's not numbers. It's they no longer check a number for the person being visited. They count the interviews with the minister to see if they're visiting their people, right? So I was scheduling a guy to come in and talk to us about their like who they'd seen and who they hadn't. And he's like, "Oh, I'm not going to do that." And I was like, "What do you mean you're not going to do that?" He's like, "Oh, I just, I don't think I have to do that." And I'm like, "Listen, you're going to do it, okay? You're going to do it because otherwise I got to chase you around. You know what I mean? Like, don't make me chase you around and do all this stuff. I don't care if you've done it or not. Just come and sit down and tell us you haven't done it.
Yeah.
Nobody's done it." It's like, it just, it's super frustrating because like we care about the people. We do. Even if we're doing it, I can tell you just from some of my own experience, you're doing it even though yes, you're checking a number, you're doing it because you care. And I've developed some really great relationships in doing it. So you have somebody who comes and visits you, or at least talks to you. You don't know if that's a ministering list thing or if they're just doing it because they're nice. Do you appreciate the contact?
Not from primary.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel it's my children are minors.
Yeah.
You should not be reaching out to them without my consent. And I don't consent to that. Stop inviting them to primary activities. I don't want them to go. But they'll send.
They're actually like calling your kid's phone, not you.
They will send letters addressed to my children.
Oh, okay.
Communications addressed to my children. My kids don't have phones. So they're not getting them that way. But it really, they have young, impressionable minds, and this is not an organization that I agree with, and I don't want you to manipulate my children or guilting them into doing something that I don't want them to do.
And when you say manipulating them, you mean the organization, not the person sending the letter, or both?
More the organization.
Got it. Okay. So one last question that was, there was one question that was asked that I'm like, I don't know how this applies. Someone asked, should society be focused on by a religion like Qatar or the UAE? I'm not quite sure what they're getting at there. So perhaps the person who asked this question, if they're listening, perhaps they could send another message and kind of clarify what they mean by that, and then maybe in another episode we could address it, because I don't know if that necessarily applies here in this one. But one that did ask that I think is really interesting is, would you be okay with one of your kids entering into this lifestyle when, of course, they're adults?
Yes.
Okay. Would there be something that you would tell them that they should watch out for, like a pros and cons list?
I just think it would be like any relationship. Look for the red flags. Also, if you're engaged in this community, in this lifestyle, you want to make sure that you're doing this with someone who is patient and loving and understanding and can communicate. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot of thought, and it takes a lot of consideration. How are my actions going to affect my relationships? And so it's not something that's easy, but relationships aren't easy. I remember my mom always saying, like, yeah, you get married, but that's not the end of it. You don't just live happily ever after. It takes work, it takes intention. And that's with polyamory as well. Is that it's not just, oh, you're doing it and it's happily ever after. It takes time. It takes the work for it to be successful.
Yeah. You know, that's any relationship, you know, but
Mm-hmm.
man, you know, the last thing I'll say is it sounds exhausting. You see, like, I could imagine like having to engage in a marriage and another relationship and like fully engaging in all of that full on with everybody consenting and managing all of those like that sounds so much more complicated than even if you were like dating multiple people. You know what I mean? Like
Don't knock until you try it, Josh.
right. Well, it's interesting. It's been fascinating listening to this in more of a detailed way and coming on, and I got to tell you, I really appreciate it. We've been going for 3 hours, so I'm gonna give you a break now. But like, it's been interesting to hear your story, hear where you came from, and hearing this progression. Um, you know, one day, I'll finish with this. One day, even though you're anonymous, one day your family members might hear this, parent, brother, sister, one of your kids down the road. Um, what would be the message you'd want to send to them in sharing this story publicly?
Don't be ashamed of who you are or who you want to be. No matter what your relationship looks like, if it's fulfilling for you and it makes you happy, then that's what's important.
Awesome. I like that. I like that. And I got to tell you, and I would say this to just to add to that, what I was hoping to get out of this, and if someone who's a member of the church who's just interested in this and made it 3 hours and 5 minutes and listened
That's
to
longer
the
than church, by the way, now that
it
it's
is
2 hours.
even longer than church when it was 3 hours. We would have been gone
That's
five
true.
minutes ago. No, it's that regardless of the choices that you have made and whether you've chosen to be out of the church, in the church, whether you've chosen a lifestyle that would not be conducive to holding a temple recommend or not, I would think that if someone were in your shoes, they would want to be treated with the love and mercy that the Savior would show. And a lot of what it sounds like your concerns have been in the church and your husband's was that people were not acting in accordance with what you perceive the Savior would do.
Mm-hmm.
So I just hope that people take this and realize that like that it doesn't matter whether you have a temple recommend or not, and it doesn't matter whether you're coming to church every week or not. We still all deserve that same treatment.
Mm-hmm.
The Savior treated everybody. If you read the scriptures and you believe in them and you've read the stories and you want to use that as your example, he treated everybody from the Pharisee, the Sadducee, to the leper, to the woman caught in adultery, to the people, the men who were crucified with them, to his apostles. Everybody got that same love and affection. And so hopefully, you know, what somebody out there might end up knocking on your door, and I hope that they show you that mercy that you hoped to have seen when you were coming. So anyhow, thanks for spending 3 freaking hours with me on this. I think this may be the longest podcast I've done, and I've actually really enjoyed it. So I
Oh,
really
good.
enjoyed it. Yeah. We'll have to have you back. I want to hear as this progresses, if anything changes. So like if you go exclusive with your boyfriend, or if you go back to being monogamous, you pull it back, or something changes, let me know. I'd love to have you back and update everybody who's listened.
Yeah,
So,
cool. I'd like that.
all right. Well, this has been the Edlow podcast. I'm supposed to tell everybody to subscribe. That's what I've learned from other people. So subscribe, follow, whatever that means. Thanks for listening.